There's discord in Roxbury over plans for redeveloping the former bus yard near Dudley Square at Washington and Bartlett Streets. The nonprofit Nuestra Comunidad plans to redevelop most of the site as mixed-income housing. More controversial is the plan to use part of the site as the new home for the Conservatory Lab Charter School. Our guest is the co-chair of the Bartlett Project Review Committee, Mike Miles. Thank you very much for being with us, Mike.
You're welcome, Chris. Nice
First
to
of
be
all, we got to go back a couple of years at least here to explain why this is such a big problem for at least some people in the community, because it's not about school, it's about what was supposed to be done with that part of the site to begin with.
That is correct. This goes back really to the beginning of the master plan process, really going back to 2004, 2003. When the community partnered with its political leaders and with Mayor Menino at the time to come up with a vision to really dictate how we would have a voice in what gets done in Roxbury and in that community. And so we proceeded along those lines. The master plan was developed with very clear guidelines and a governance process on how community parcels would be developed. And so Bartlett was one of the initial projects that came out of that process. You may not know this, but I was the initial chairperson of the oversight committee, subsequently served for 6 years on that committee and became the PRC co-chair for Bartlett through that process. And so we really have a really good history of active community engagement around this development process.
Well, part of what was recommended in this process was that a section of this land should be used for something that would deliver economic development. Explain what seemed to be likely for that.
So we were talking about a number of components which is anchored in generating wealth for the residents and community members in Roxbury. Those things would be housing, those things would be commercial space, which might house a commercial entity, large box like a Harvest Co-op, which is planned to be there, and then retail segments that would also be available to start small businesses and provide opportunities for folks to have employment and business opportunities in the community.
Because one of the other things is it sounds as if at least some of these businesses would have activity on the street past 5 p.m., unlike a school.
That is correct. We would envision some things that would be more of a sit-down restaurant type of venue that could be including a jazz sort of component to that. So there are definitely elements that could go past the sort of evening hours, if you will.
Well, what I picked up from the recent meeting, and this is even just from people who had a problem with what's happening now, is that they wouldn't mind having the school somewhere in Roxbury. But I guess it's also about the process for getting the school to be put into the plan for the site. What about the process?
Yeah, that's really a big piece of contention, Chris. We started with a very clear mandate in the RFP, and the developer responded to that, and we were very pleased to have an outcome that delivered the vision that the community was seeking. And so in November of 2013, the BRA Zoning Commission approved the project that was originally developed to go there. And so in early 2014 is when the developer really sort of went off course and started to suggest an exploration of a school, when in fact the school had never been discussed, never been as part of the charrettes or any of the development conversations. So we immediately said that's not what our intention was. This was really purely about economic development. And frankly, through the project notification process, the P&F that the developer has to file with the BRA, there was specific comments in there that said that the developer had met with the community on a monthly basis throughout the process to keep us informed and to have a dialogue and have a partnership. So once that approval from the BRA Zoning Commission happened, we assumed everything was still going forward, but then we come to find out that there's suddenly a conversation about a school. And so throughout 2014, the developer then proceeded to kind of move forward with their own agenda to push that agenda around the school. And what we found out throughout the course of that year is that they had done several things. One is that they engaged a conversation with the school to really talk about a purchase and sale. And anyone in real estate knows before you get to a purchase and sale, there's an offer to purchase or offer to sale and an agreement to purchase. And that had to happen sometime in midsummer of 2014. We then learned that development plans, meaning architectural drawings and renderings, had been done by a firm they hired, and that through a charter school apparently has to be approved by the state because the state distributes those funds. So this was done in September. All of this is going on without our knowledge in terms of open inclusive and transparent communication. Then in November of 2014, we read in the Boston Herald that the Conservatory Lab Charter School has now signed a purchase and sale agreement with the developer to to basically buy 1.5 acres of this 9-acre parcel, which we felt was a direct violation of the economic opportunity for residents and community members. So of course we were concerned, and we have been voicing that concern. And we now understand that as they did that, the Conservatory Labs Charter School has spent an enormous amount of money to do all of that work, and they're now concerned that that is at risk. And they also are saying that the developer needs the $2 million purchase price, so-called $2 million purchase price, as a catalyst to move the project forward, when in fact we see development work going on, which is roads being cut, systems being laid, and buildings being prepared to be built. So there's really been a lot of rhetoric that's been disingenuous in terms of not being forward and upfront with the community, and also moving this toward dividing our community. Everybody loves schools.
Right. Well, what's also interesting here is that, in Westbury, they're saying that, we've been telling the community about the school in some way or other since sometime in 2014, but it also seems to me that from that time on, they were so connected to this charter school plan that they really couldn't pursue other alternatives either.
Yeah, and I would say to that that communication was not in a community forum. So more recently, as they've gotten sort of all this sort of process together with regard to the school plans and all of the information they've been bringing, now they go to the BRA and say we want to have community meetings. Those were the exact community meetings we should have had when they were thinking about this. An open partnership would have been, hey folks, we're thinking of a little different component of adding to the project. We'd like to come to you and tell you about that. And we would have said, well, what are your ideas, right? And if it was a school and we agreed to that, we would have opened it up to other schools, Roxbury Prep, KIP, Bridge Charter. There are other schools that need buildings, right? And there are other entities. So by there being a deal done directly with the Conservatory Lab, it totally circumvented the community process.
One other card on the table, the executive director with Nuestra says that, if we have to pull the plug on the charter school, then the housing's not going to be buildable or fundable for at least quite a while.
Yeah, so I understand that to be untrue. So as I said earlier, the roads are being cut, the systems are being laid. Building B, which is the apartment commercial building at the Washington Street side of the project, is ready to go. And also Building E, which is a 16-unit condominium building on Bartlett Street, is also ready to go. I'm sorry, on Guild Street. So I understand that they do not need these funds in order to maintain that momentum. And as they sell those condos, that would help them to continuously move the project forward.
One other part of this, the city, the BRA, couldn't they step in and say, we have to have a reset here?
Right. Well, I'm looking for some clarity, honestly, from the BRA on this, and I know that they have participated and organized these meetings, so I think it's at a point where we need some direction from them as to what their view is as it relates to the process, as it relates to the vision that the community had, as it relates to the partnership that the community and the city have, because we now have a change. There's Mayor Walsh and Brian Golden and folks like John Barrows who know that we had a relationship with Mayor Menino in this master plan process, and it's really important that we stick to that. And I think that's what's really the basis of some of the tension right now.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
From the Bartlett Project Review Committee, Mike Miles. We'll have more news in just a moment.